So are you going to trust your life to a knockoff tourniquet? That's what I'm going to discuss in today's video, and I'm going to probably share a view that's not common. Ultimately, I want to trust my life to the best equipment possible, but I don't think it's as simple and clear cut as that. So first thing first, let's talk a little bit about the two tourniquets at hand here. I've got the North American Rescue cat tourniquet, and then I have a China-made knockoff tourniquet here. So just as a general, just because I was curious, I think 2 days ago I lashed this up. As you can see, I kind of crushed my protein bottle with it, and I put this tourniquet on here. I was just wanting to see if it would snap, and I could potentially crank it down, but I didn't want to break my bottle. But I wanted to see it snap, and I also want to see if it would lose tension with time. It did not lose tension with time, I can actually say that. So I'm going to go over real quick. I'm going to show you the differences in these tourniquets. I'll talk about some of the differences I noticed, talk about some of the things I've heard, not witnessed personally, and then I'll talk about just in general the purchase of gear. Let me set this eyesore away for now. Not that it's an eyesore, it's Modern Warrior protein. So let's talk about the tourniquet differences that I can firsthand see, notice, and feel. So if you're not familiar, the North American Rescue Cat Tourniquet is pretty much the standard for this style of tourniquet. It's good quality, no doubt about it. They're very well made and they're very reliable. On the flip side, China and probably some other countries have started to produce some knockoffs as well. In their attempt to do so, they've started mass producing these, and they're considerably cheaper, like way cheaper. But we're talking about life-saving equipment here, so should we do it? We'll talk about that at the end, but first let's look at the differences. So in the quality of the webbing itself, if I'm being honest, I haven't put them to a tensile strength test or anything like that, but the quality of the actual webbing, I don't feel a lot of difference in the primary belt strap, Velcroed belt strap. I don't feel a lot of difference in the equipment. When I look at the buckle, let me undo this here. When I look at the buckles are very similar, and I honestly, if I'm being true, I cannot feel a difference in the quality in the buckle itself. So when I come over to our plastic tie down strap, this is basically where you're going to put your tension rod at, and you're going to put it in there and then Velcro it. I've got some flex here. Let me feel the NAR. I've got about the same amount of flex there. So I would say from quality perspective, these two, if I'm wearing a blindfold and I don't know which one is which, I don't know the difference. I don't really feel a difference. Same thing with not the same thing. So before I get to that, let's go ahead and get to that. So one way you can tell whether or not you've got a knockoff or if you got the actual authentic thing is on the back of this brace buckle here. On the North American one, you can clearly see it's got the wording and all of their branding, if you will. Whereas the China-made one, it doesn't. So let's talk about the quality of that particular part. It's pretty flexible on both. Now, that doesn't mean they're the same quality. This plastic might be able to flex more, the higher quality one might be able to flex more before it breaks, maybe not. The one area that I can clearly see a difference in quality, and I don't know why they chose to go that route, is the tension rod itself. So the tension rod on the North American Rescue, that is a solid tension rod. The thing is hard and stout. Whereas this one is, this is the size of like a Sharpie marker, and this is the size of like a number 2 pencil as far as the width goes. And this is stout. I've seen some where they just bend it and break it, but so maybe that's something that they've improved on in the China market, because while I could, it's not easily doing it. I'm putting some good pressure there. And I'd say I don't feel a whole lot of difference in the strength it would take for me to bend. I would assume it would be easier on this because it is thinner. So I'll give it to North American on that I would expect that this would bend first. And the one thing I can't check, and this is the one part that I should say troubles me, is the attachment. So when you apply a tourniquet, once you've got this thing down, you should have it, a couple, if you don't know, you should have it a couple inches away from the wound, high and tight. You want to have it, before you even start tensioning, you want it to be tight enough to where you can't fit 3 fingers in there. So I want to get it nice and tight with the Velcro first. And that's when I'm really going to start, cutting off the circulation so that we can stop that bleeding. What I can't tell on the China made is the attachment in here. How well is that going to hold up? So by looking, and by the fact I did apply this to a protein bottle for what that's worth, was that as much tension as I would need to cut off an arterial, bleed? It kind of depends on where it is and how it is. Maybe, maybe not. But from the looks, I can't tell a whole lot different. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about just quality in gear. And this is where I differ from a lot in this niche, if you will, especially on YouTube and just forums and boards. There's so many people so often that are going to come out there and just ridicule and dog cheap gear. Now let me say this. I grew up extremely poor. And even as a young private in the military, I was still pretty poor. I had a baby, and I didn't have money. I didn't have any spending money. And so cheap gear was all, if I were getting gear at the time, that's all I could get for the most part, right? So is cheap gear better than no gear? Most of the time, not always. There are times, like if this tourniquet were to fail me in a critical moment, that's not better. But I'll hit on tourniquets specifically. I just want to talk about cheap gear. Now, at this point in life, I'm retired military. I have a couple businesses, and I can afford some better equipment. Even so, I still don't always just buy the most expensive thing out there. You generally in the gear world do get value. You kind of get what you put into it a lot of times. I do get value, but at the end of the day, I don't always need the most expensive item, the value. If I'm looking at something for ultralight hiking, that might be a good purchase on the high end of stuff if I can afford it. But if I'm looking at, compressible washcloths to wash my face in the woods and throw away, I don't necessarily need the most expensive brand. Maybe the cheap thing is better. So that's my general take. I am not what I would call, there's a lot of gear snobs out there, and I'm not one of them. And I've got good gear, and I could play that role as well, but it's just not, it's not financially responsible in some ways, and it's just kind of, it's foolish to me. And you have to recognize not everyone is working with the same budget. And I don't want someone to get discouraged just because they don't have a good budget. Now, going to the tourniquet specifically, I could create a tourniquet out of a t-shirt and a stick. I mean, there's ways you can improvise a tourniquet. It's not ideal, and that's why we want to pack a cat tourniquet. I want to have a cat tourniquet available. I want to have a good quality, dependable tourniquet available. So, given the choice, and if I can, I would certainly go with the North American Rescue Tourniquet. It's proven, it's well proven. If it's just out of my ballpark and I can't afford it, I don't see anything wrong with going with the China knockoff. It's better than nothing, in my opinion. At the end of the day, if it fails, well, if you didn't have anything, that's failing too, and you're gonna have to go to an improvised tourniquet at that point anyway. So just know that you're dealing with a potentially lesser quality. One of the things I've heard, though I haven't seen, and there might be videos out there showing it, so I'm not saying it's made up, is I've heard that these things, they're kind of hit or miss, that sometimes they do snap when you're doing up the proper tension to get that down. Now, one thing I will say, and I'm certainly not defending China manufacturing quality, you get what you pay for. And I have certainly, I've had good luck and bad luck with China products. I've had some stuff that has really surprised me with quality. I did some ballistic plate testing on some China plates, and I did not expect as good results as I got. I actually got very good results. It surprised me. Then again, sometimes I expect something and it breaks the first use. So that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, when we're buying some of the cheap gear, is consistency in the quality and expectations. And that's where you kind of give way when you don't have the budget for the higher end stuff. But to this, like I said, I've heard and I've seen videos where they talk about that they've witnessed them failing on the tensioning aspect of the tourniquet. So that's something to consider. Given the choice, I'd certainly go with the North American Rescue or another reputable, maybe a Rat's Tourniquet or some other kind of a reputable known brand quality. However, if it's just out of my budget, I wouldn't consider it all lost. So then the question comes, well, should you not just save up to get that? Well, in some of these things, we're talking about the difference of like $2 versus $30+. That's a lot of savings. I go ahead and spend that $2 now, and then I can start saving up. So I don't know that I would wait. So while I'm not saying to go out and put all your eggs in the Chinese tourniquet basket, I am saying that for me, and it's your own decision, make it. But for me, if I didn't have the choice and I had the choice of nothing or something, I would consider this a viable option to go with and give it a shot. So that's it on these two, kind of a comparison and discussion. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, just in general on the tourniquet specific, but also in general on the gear. I know that a lot of people don't share that view. That's fine. I've made it half a century so far with it, and it's worked okay for me. So we're all entitled to feel how you want, and by all means, spend all the money you want on all the gear you want. I'm not against good gear, but I'm not against taking shortcuts. I have some Harbor Freight tools and I have Snap-on tools, so it's all kind of what it's going to serve you for and whether or not the value's there for you. That's it. Safe prepping. Until next time.